guess everyone's entitled for one good scare.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Jeff and Collin in the Morning. We're your hosts, Collin Peters.
And Jeff Manfred.
Well, Jeff, we got a new, different, exciting adventure to talk about today. We've talked about this for a while as a sort of a side project, but we're introducing it on this show for everybody instead. And this is going to be entitled Scary Stories to Tell by the Campfire, or do we settle on that title? Or
Actually, I like that one because
I like that too.
I think honestly, like originally we were going to do this episode, like record this episode while we were actually sitting around a campfire. But, you know, weather sucks because of rain. But
or summer. Summer just sucks in general.
Oh my gosh.
Bugs. Heat. Along with fire heat. But s'mores kick ass.
That's what I was thinking. Like, honestly, get a nice picture of us doing this and then, you know, s'mores. But
it's funny because I actually got the idea for this when we were doing our Halloween special episode. Because we were looking for an intro that was something different, and you gave me the Zachary quote.
Yeah.
And just hearing him talk with like that Vincent Price-esque voice, I was like, this actually would be really cool if we would just tell like some famous ghost stories and then give something a little different, add something a little more to the channel, create more flow, and have something maybe that people can listen to and go like, I remember that story when I was a kid, or they never heard it before, because we're pretty versed into these famous scary or fun ghost stories, because it's very, how do I say it, influential in our part. I mean, I remember some of my earliest memories was in elementary school, going to the library and just running to the horror section. I mean, I couldn't get enough of seeing what Hollywood did with the Universal monsters, because they actually had books and pictures of how they put the makeup together and behind the scenes stuff. Because, spoiler alert, at our age, we didn't have the internet.
No, we had, Fangoria magazine and I think Horror Hound. I'm trying to remember, like, there was a lot more back when we were younger where we got introduced to horror more frequently. Or now, like, the internet's at our fingertips, so you can look up anything, take, for instance, the new Monsters movie that came out. I've seen more pictures for that in the past 48 hours.
The more and more it comes out, the closer to their release. Same sort of with, like, the magazines. Like, you got a little bit of teasers here and there that build up the hype, and then the closer it got to the movie's actual release, it was, here's more to get you really into the picture. But, like, back in the day, man, we used to have audio tapes of ghost stories, too, or scary stories that we could listen to. And the funniest thing that still gets me is, like I said, this was elementary school. We were allowed to do this stuff. I mean, some of these stories, I don't think, like, with how sensitive the world is, I really don't think some parents would let you even, like, attempt to read this stuff. Like, I think even Alvin Schwartz's Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark was kind of controversial in some areas of, especially the United States.
That was actually the one thing I remember. Like, before we started recording, we were both talking about how that was the one thing we remember from elementary school, reading the scary stories about that. And it's kind of crazy that, like, even now, like, they have the movie, they have a documentary about his life. It's just the fact that we grew up with it. Like, we know what it is.
And I feel like Scary Stories in general, not Alvin Schwartz's book, but it's been like a staple in American culture. Especially, it was like a family gathering thing around October and Halloween. It was something to tell stories that you got the traditional ghosts and witches and bats and black cats. And, like, I remember even songs that we used to do, like at 6th grade camp, you know, we did the Cat Came Back song, and we talked about scary stories and went on a haunted hayride even then. That was a lot of fun stuff. Of course, we were in our element with that.
Oh, absolutely.
But I've always enjoyed scary stories, whether they scare you or whether they don't. And it was funny because at the end of this episode, we are going to be talking about a couple scary stories that we've had that we decided to pick to tell. They're not very long, but one of them that I picked was a book that actually started it all for me. And I got a really interesting story about this. It's called In a Dark, Dark Room and Other Scary Stories by Alvin Schwartz. And I've actually had this book, or I shouldn't say me personally, because I lived very close in proximity with my mom's side of the family growing up. And this book was kind of like a staple at my grandparents' house. We kept it in a drawer. There was like a little, they had like a little cabinet out on like their main porch, and in this one drawer there was like little fun shit like cards, maybe those you know what I mean, like with the visor
Oh,
that
like the viewfinders.
that's it. Yeah, there was things like that in there. Little stuff for kids to play with, and this book was always in there. And I remember my cousins and my sister would read this book to us, and the illustrations by Dirk Zimmer are actually pretty frightening but very cartoonish. I know everybody can't see, but I'm showing Jeff right now.
I mean, they actually look really cool. I'm looking at a troll and the skeleton that really pop on that cover. Granted, there's a pirate and a ghost.
Because it's scary stories and other stories. But there was a really good quote in here by Alvin Schwartz. Because for anybody who doesn't know, Alvin Schwartz is the main author of Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark. And it's kind of been his staple to talk about scary stories. And the foreword in here was, most of us like scary stories because we like feeling scared. When there is no real danger, feeling scared is fun. The best time for these stories is at night, in front of a fire or in the dark. Tell them slowly and quietly, and everyone will have a good time. And that's the best way to describe any sort of scary story, really. I mean, you can talk about reminiscing and fun stuff and comedy. Like, you can hear stories about somebody who was in a war. You can talk fucking maybe politics if you want. But something about scary stories that just seems to resonate with you. Because I think there's still a sense of unknown. There's skepticism, like especially when there's ghosts and like spiritual things involved. And I just get into that stuff because I always feel like there is an element of it could be bullshit just to make you behave, kind of like a 10 commandments. If you don't obey this, you're going to go to hell sort of thing. But it also makes you wonder, like, we really can't prove what's happened after we die. Exactly. I mean, we've had people who say they have outer body experiences and sometimes their lives completely change.
Absolutely.
Other times there are people who are probably just saying it because they're just looking for attention. So we don't know, for sure unless we experience it ourselves. And I think at some point we all have our own stories, and others probably can just blow it off and just say, it's the wind or whatever. It's kind of like how I heard somebody say, you put two people in a house, and if one person believes in ghosts and they hear a noise, they go, oh, it's a ghost, because they believe in it. And you got another person who doesn't, they just go, it's the wind. So it's, we got like this strange, interesting dynamic, and I think it does add to the mythos of scary stories, because there'll always be that tug and pull with it until you actually experience something for yourself, or if you want to like seek out answers. I have talked to some clairvoyants and people who kind of were like an Ed and Lorraine Warren, and they've told me some things, and there are some things that I raise an eyebrow at, and then there are other things I'm like I don't think they can just make some stuff up.
Yeah.
So, and some things I'm just like, wow, how did you know that? And they just say like it's their way of communication. I'm like, oh, okay. So I've always been fascinated by it. And I gotta say, this book, In a Dark, Dark Room by Alvin Schwartz, is one of the main staples in my life. The original book actually went missing. I actually just repurchased this on eBay. This is an original one from the mid to late 80s, early 90s, because my sister was talking to me about it, and she even said that she kind of wished she had that book back, and she has her kids, and I saw it on eBay and I said, "Hey, for like $10, you want me to get it?" And she said, "Yeah, sure, why not?" And it's in great condition. And so I figured while I have it before I hand it over, I'd bring it in and be like, "Hey, I'm going to read this for this episode."
That's actually really cool.
But my sister also was the one who introduced me to things like Goosebumps. She was telling me about piano lessons can be murder. That was a fun story. I think Welcome to Camp Nightmare.
Oh my gosh.
I always got into that stuff. My favorite Goosebumps book was The Haunted Mask.
Oh wow.
That was my favorite Goosebump book. Something just so eerie and surreal about a real face that turned into a monster, and then it's like still spiritually connected to where they think like, oh, somebody loves me, I'm not hideous, that they want to wear me, and then it like stays attached to even a little girl yet. It's like, man, that is some dark shit.
But even like all those books, they had a lot of dark elements, but yet they were toned down. Um, I can't remember. Was it Night Living Dummy was actually one of my favorites because all I remember is Slappy.
Mm-hmm.
Because that's a frightening thing. Ventriloquist dummies have always kind of freaked me out, but I'm like I'm not afraid of them. It's just like yeah, it's a weird element because like you, like take for instance they made fun of it in the Chucky series where he was pretending to be a puppet. Well, in that element, like you're now like, well, is the puppet real or is it the person talking? So it's like it's that concept for that, and then the fact that Slappy was an evil puppet. Yeah, it kind of freaked me out as a kid.
And technically, Slappy really wasn't the evil one in Night of the Living Dummy. He didn't come until the very end, and then in the sequels.
Yeah, I remember more of the sequels than anything. But yeah, I also remember that from the movie.
Yeah.
But like even now, like even I remember reading. Was it Fear Street? Actually, I lie. My older sister Ryan actually was reading Fear Street to us, and she would do it like right before bedtime. So I remember all that kind of playing into it. So it was kind of cool, like watching them revisit that as an adult, like making movies out of it. So there's a lot of R.L. Stine that's out there that you won't really realize you've read it or watched one of the shows or whatever until you've actually like started talking to somebody about it. And that was one thing I feel like it's almost a rite of passage. Like your older sibling's gonna do it with you, and then you're gonna do it as time goes on.
Like a whisper down the alley sort of thing. That's
Yeah.
how I felt. Like that was the same thing with me and my cousins with like pro wrestling was obviously a big one. Not that that's scary story related, but because they were older and that was like more of their they actually watched it during the heyday and were filling me in, and then I would go to Blockbuster and rent the videos and relive it through that. But
Blockbuster was also a rite of passage. You had to.
Yes, that's true too. But the other thing was they were the ones who would tell me more about like Freddy and Jason and Michael Myers, and because my mom and dad knew about it, and obviously I told the story before in our Friday the 13th episode where my mom and dad saw part 3 on a date night and told me the story about how they said they couldn't get over how Jason squeezed the guy's head so hard that the eyeball popped out. And I was like, oh my God, I gotta see this. It just like got me, like I wasn't scared. I was more like, yeah, show me. But my cousins were the ones that saw the original movies and could fill you in on the characters. And also, speaking of scary stories to tell by a campfire, I mentioned this before on Friday the 13th episode, but my cousin Jeremiah was so good at explaining the story of Jason Goes to Hell better than the actual movie, and he cut out all the dumb body swapping shit and just cut to the parts about Jason being a killer and how his niece was the one who killed him and Freddy's hand grabbing the hockey mask. And it sounded like the way he just... And he actually told me by a campfire at night.
Oh, no shit. That's awesome.
Yeah. And all I could think about was when I was hearing it was like it was night, it was, fires going. I just remember it being a really memorable and a fun time. It was like a typical cliche scary story around the campfire. I remember my dad was there, my grandfather was there, I was there. I can't remember if my brother was there. But I mainly remember my dad, my cousin, and myself, and then my grandfather joined in. And one of the things was I sat facing my house, And all I could think of was when Jeremiah's telling the story, was thinking of like Jason and his niece fighting each other, and she stabs him, and he like comes out of like the window in my living room, or like they're fighting on my porch or
Oh, no
something.
shit. That's awesome.
And then I see like the hockey mask fly off of him, and Freddy's hand in my yard like grabs the hockey mask as he's telling the story. I was like, oh. So my imagination like totally ran wild with it, and it's just a fun memory because I look back on it and I go, that was a lot of fun. But I always, just love the scary stories by campfires and hearing about ghosts and different ghost encounters. In elementary school, there were 3 books I remember. I don't know how schools do it anymore. It seems like holidays are really kind of driven out of schools because of, I don't know whether you want to say beliefs, or teachers are having more of a say in how they go about what they want to say and do in classrooms without any sort of real accountability. Or even a kid might have an opinion and the parents say something, and then it just becomes a big clusterfuck now, it seems. But I remember 3 books in particular that have always stuck out to me. One was called Talipo. I don't know, did you ever hear of it?
The name sounds familiar. I might actually have to look this up.
I actually have the YouTube link. I can send it to you. But it was about an old man with these 3 dogs. He lives out in the woods. He was a hunter, and he saw this animal that was kind of like, you didn't know how to describe it.
Is that the thing that was scratching at the window, going Talipo? Like,
yeah. So you know about it.
Like as you're explaining, I'm like, man, this the skin on my neck kind of went
right, because what happens is he sees this thing, he cuts the tail off of it, he cooks it in like a cauldron for soup or something, and he eats it. Yeah, because he didn't really get much. Didn't get much for hunting apparently, so that was the best he got. And then the creatures, they're like, Talipo, and he actually gets in the fucking house.
Get the fuck out of here.
I mean, it's scary. I'm not gonna give too much away from it, but it's I remember thinking, holy shit. And it kind of has like one of those Tales from the Crypt endings. Well, actually, yeah, kind of, but the one that has more of a Tales from the Crypt ending is the second book that I remember, called That Terrible Halloween Night.
No, I don't remember that one.
Really? Okay. Yeah. It's about this old man with these his 2 grandkids, and the 2 grandkids originally try to scare him in his chair, and they're like, Grandpa, aren't you scared? And he goes, oh, I haven't been scared since that terrible Halloween night. So he talks about how he dressed up as a little kid, put on a fake mustache, went around trick-or-treating, went into this haunted house, and there's like a giant jack-o'-lantern that's trying to chase him. There's a ghost that's trying to chase him, and then he falls down the stairs in the basement, and they say, don't go in the room with the yellow door, or I forget what exactly it was, but he does anyway, and you don't see anything except for this glowing light and this shocked look on his face. And then as he gets out of the house, he becomes an old man. And he says, and I've become an old man ever since. So it kind of has that Tales from the Crypt ending there. But there's so much that goes on. It leaves you with that, what happened in that room? Like, I'm still trying to figure out what happened in that room. I even went back and found that book again, and I was like, trying to piece together, what was in that room?
It's got to be something so frightening that it actually aged him.
Yeah. Or was it kind of like a hocus pocus thing where it drained his soul and just left him go? Right?
Dude, I never even thought about that.
This is this is like blowing my mind in elementary school, and I felt like anybody asking these questions. Maybe I was too young for my own good, to be saying that. But and then the other one I really enjoyed was called The Pumpkin Smasher, which was this story about a witch that came to this town, like a very old colonial-esque looking town, and every Halloween she would smash the pumpkins on the porches or around the houses, wherever they were.
This bitch.
And everybody was pissed off and said, enough of this stuff. So what they did was they found this huge rock, painted it to look like a jack-o'-lantern, and she comes and tries to like claw and scratch and pick it up, but she can't, and just ruins it and is like, ah, screw it. And then when she can't pick it up and destroy the pumpkin, she just goes away. And ever since then, she leaves everybody alone, and they're left to carve their pumpkins and leave everything, as is, and enjoy the holiday with their carved pumpkins. And then the last image you see is the jack-o'-lantern still there, and it's all wrecked from her.
That's awesome, actually.
I love that story too. It was so funny because I remembered the stories, but I couldn't remember the titles, and it bothered me for a couple years. And just recently, I found all three of them again.
That's kind of funny that like we started talking about this, doing it again because we needed a Halloween episode.
Mm-hmm.
And the fact that like you're now just rediscovering them makes it even kind of more of a what's the word I'm looking for? A coincidence,
Right?
rediscovering stuff. Like I really remember a lot more from the Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark. And when you brought the Alvin Schwartz up, I'm sitting there going, that's the only thing I could really remember off the top of my head, and it was the fact that the movie itself played on that as well. But like the big toe is the one that always got me.
It's so funny too. You mentioned that movie because I always take great pride in that movie took place in Pennsylvania.
I know, and I thought that was amazing.
And I always have said this growing up that I feel like people don't realize how much atmosphere of Halloween you can actually absorb from Pennsylvania. Like there are still sections, like you go to a city like New Hope, especially in the fall, when you see the leaves change and they still have these old sort of like colonial type buildings. It's very close-knit community. Like you get the feeling like you're traveling back in time there, and it's very open to like accepting that holiday specifically. I mean, every year for a while they were doing the Rocky Horror Show at the Bucks County Playhouse. I remember Rochetta and I actually went there during 2020 when the pandemic things were slightly opening up. They had a Halloween 2020 rock and roll concert, and it was like still like nonstop celebration. Like everywhere we went, people were like, I remember our hostess at a restaurant that we went to, she had this shirt that had like all the horror women icons, like Lily Munster, Morticia, Elvira, Vampira. And John and I were like, that's a really cool shirt. People were walking around in costumes. Just,
oh, that's so cool.
Yeah, I mean, it was so much fun. Hell, I walked around in costumes there years ago. I think it was 2015 because Roddy Piper died, and I dressed as Roddy Piper. And as I was walking around, a bouncer or security guard saw me, and he just looked at me and he goes, R.I.P. Yeah, I know, right? And I was like, right.
That's awesome, though.
But you can definitely feel like that would be a ghost town or like some place to go to and visit. It was so cool.
I mean, look at Penhurst alone. That essentially that's where that was filmed.
Mm-hmm.
But that's a very, I guess. I know they have the haunted attraction. I know they have ghost tours. I was actually gonna do last year. They were actually playing movies in the courtyard, but I think it had to be a group of 10 people, but it was a set price and it was only their movies. So I'm like,
yeah, I don't know about that.
I was like, if it was a movie I could bring or whatever, I thought it would have been like a cool thing to get everybody together, watch like a horror movie there or whatever.
I'd like it if they could actually do just a tour. Like, just tour you around Penhurst and see some of the things.
I think they do, but it's also included as a ghost tour, so you're kind of getting a little bit of both.
Okay.
So, I think Lexi did it, and she said that you get, like, elements of the haunted attractions, because they kind of just, like, tuck everything away, but they're also getting elements of, like, kind of the asylum itself.
Okay. Yeah, I think I've done the attractions before, and it's a lot of fun there. I mean, I can't talk about Penhurst enough as far as if you like the actors and the scary feelings and stuff, but walking through that asylum is a surreal feeling. My girlfriend, she had a coworker who used to work there and said that he wasn't too thrilled about how they turned it into this haunted attraction where they're profiting off of it, because he said that the horrors that really happened there were real horrors. It's nothing that you should just be like haha about, because like once those kids that had special needs were let go and they shut the asylum down, they just let them go.
Oh wow.
and it was overcrowded. Like think of like at the beginning of Halloween when they're driving in the rain, Dr. Loomis and the nurse, and they're like, I didn't think they let him out at night. It's probably what it was kind of like.
Yeah. It's like
So Michael Myers may have been roaming around.
I go. There's another one that I actually did was actually up in Jim Thorpe. They have a prison up there that is supposedly haunted, and they do a ghost tour up there, and it's actually really kind of a cool element to see. I did it like years ago though.
And it's funny we talk about this and haunted places and attractions and scary stories. I was just recently up in Sleepy Hollow.
I'm not gonna lie, I'm kind of jealous about that.
Really? You were up in Salem,
I know.
though.
I was gonna talk about that next. But...
Well, I mean, go ahead, tell your story.
Well, like the reason I was jealous is because literally we passed the exit to go there, and it was. Let's say I was, you had to take a right-hand turn. I was all the way in the third fucking left lane. Because we were actually going to go just check it out and then head back to Maine. So we went to Maine for a retirement ceremony for Lexi's cousin from the Navy. And it was actually up at Fort Knox. It was a cool, nice little area. It was a retired naval base. So it was kind of cool to see that element. If you actually see some of the pictures of me and my daughter, Thea, in kind of doing a spooky tour. Because I was trying to keep her quiet during the ceremony, and she took me through the creepiest parts of this fort, and I'm like, kid, we're gonna get haunted at some point. But so on the way back, we ended up doing Salem. It was only 2 days. I wish we had more time, but like I was actually doing more stuff by myself in the morning because I was getting up at like 5:30, and then kind of still training for a mud run. I was trying to do 3 miles a day, so doing that in Maine and then there because literally when I came back, I did that mud run. I was actually checking out more stuff in the morning for that hour that I was out, and that's where most of my pictures came from. But it was like I wish I had more time to check out the rest of it because like we were like a block from town hall and the main area for like all the shops with Salem, and then it kind of just spread out from there. So I got to go see was it Roper's Mansion, and came back and did. I didn't realize I was actually at the school from the Hocus Pocus movie.
Okay.
It wasn't until after we did the driving tour that I went past it like 4 times. Like... But like even the elements that they tried to keep there were actually really cool. They even I would say if you are gonna do that, do the trolley tour because they give a lot of history. They give a lot of movie stuff that the guy makes fun of. Because he's like, the horrors in that town were worse than what those movies are. But yeah, like the aesthetic, they even kept the cobblestone areas for like the main, I guess I could consider it Main Street.
I love that. I love that they preserve that.
Other thing, don't take a toddler to the Salem Witch Trial Museum. That was probably the scariest shit she's ever seen in her life.
Oh, just wait.
Oh my gosh.
That's awesome though. I'm planning on doing that one day myself, but I'm glad like you got to do that. And it was actually you doing Salem that inspired Jackie and I to go to Sleepy Hollow. Because her brother and sister-in-law live up in Albany, so we actually passed by it.
Oh, no way.
And when we were coming down the one time after a visit, I saw the sign and I was like, oh, okay. And then from where we were only like 2.5 hours away. So the more we talked about it, the more we said, why don't we just make a day trip out of it? We don't really have to stay up there exactly. And I looked up things that you can do there. I think closer to the end of October, they do reenactment scenes, probably have somebody do a headless horseman thing.
Sorry, that'd be kind of fucking frightening. Don't get me wrong. You see a dude running up with a flaming
right? But I'm all about it. But it looked like there were some pretty wild things up there, like that weren't even Halloween related, like the Rockefeller estate. That was pretty wild to see. Like, you want to know rich, that's rich. But I really dug the Sleepy Hollow in the town next to it, Tarrytown, where a lot of that's mentioned in the story. And it was so funny because one of the things on the list was the cemetery at Sleepy Hollow. And if you specifically watch the cartoon, the cemetery and the old Dutch church are almost depicted pretty accurately, really. It's definitely not as woodsy as it used to be. The bridge obviously is not as rickety as it was. But there are signs everywhere that say this is the bridge that inspired Washington Irving for Ichabod to cross to get away from the Headless Horseman. The cemetery has Washington Irving's family's plot, and he has two flags up by his grave, and it's got like a little gated section with steps, and around the steps there are these two jack-o'-lanterns, and it says that the Headless Horseman leaves the jack-o'-lanterns at the family plot as gifts.
Oh, that's awesome.
I thought it was really cool. And that cemetery is huge. I mean, I cannot believe the length of the thing. It's really almost like the length of the town. And they have mausoleums, they have huge tombstones, they have small tombstones, and it's just like on hills, and it's just crazy. And they said it's still an active cemetery, which still blows my mind.
But at the end of the day, it's still a cemetery.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
But they do actual tours there. I just walked it myself because I was like, I don't know. Like, we have to, like, what more can they really tell us that we probably can't find out? But I was just, like, amazed at, like, knowing the story of the horseman and the bridge, and then the bee on that bridge, and seeing the church and being around the church and go, but this is where it was all inspired. And if you read the book and you see like any sort of drawings or whatever, you're like, wow, some of these places actually depicted it really well, and it's like I'm standing right here. So that was a thrill for me. And on top of it, it's not in Sleepy Hollow, but it's very close by. They call it the Sleepy Hollow Great Pumpkin Blaze of Hudson Valley, where it's just thousands of carved pumpkins, real and fake, and they make up all sorts of crazy artistic drawings and just light them up, and it's so wild. I mean, I highly recommend it to anybody. You just walk around and see all these like crazy art carvings, and you can pace yourself and take as much time as you want, take as many pictures as you want, but like the things they do there, it's not just pumpkins, but they show you how they make bridges and jellyfish and other thing. Like I think there was like a cop car when they did the New York city skyline.
Oh, wow.
It was so wild. And then they had the infinite trail that showed you like how Ichabod, like this is where he had to run, and it felt like it just went on forever, and the jack-o'-lanterns just lit the way with this blue hue yet around it, and it was so creepy and spooky. And then you see the horsemen and Ichabod all carved into these pumpkins put together, and these jack-o'-lanterns that are getting thrown and hit Ichabod, and then you got the Headless Horseman Bridge with the murals of them inside, and the pumpkins just lighten everything up, and then they play the galloping of the horse as you're walking through the bridge, and you're like, oh. Jackie and I made a video where we're like, do you hear that? We gotta go. We just had so much fun and a blast there. It's called the Great Pumpkin Blaze of Hudson Valley. It's really cool. I highly recommend it.
That's actually really cool.
See, it's just, and then again, it's the influence of these scary stories, you know. Like they influence us so much that we want to go to the actual towns where these things took place. Like you went to Salem, I went to Sleepy Hollow. The stories about Penhurst, you know, I've been to Penhurst. When I heard about these Freddy and Jason and Michael Myers, it's like I had to watch these movies. Lo and behold, the movies don't really explain a whole lot. They're just there for entertaining, but
but if you look at it, horror movies are modern day ghost stories.
Absolutely.
And that's how I actually view a lot of stuff that I watch. Granted, I've watched a lot of shit, and I'm like, it's just a bad story being told.
Especially now. I don't think anybody knows how to tell a good ghost story, especially in the Hollywood realm.
No, the only person that keeps telling stories is Stephen King. Somehow that dude just pumps them out. He's like, here you go. I know there's other horror writers out there, but he's the only one that seems to be like pumping out like 80 books a year and it's still going.
Horror lives.
Exactly. And that's the thing. Everyone craves for a good ghost story. And that's where I think the element for ghost stories really comes from. It's, like you said, the element of being afraid, even though nothing to be afraid of.
Yeah, I remember thinking, listening to that quote and stuff, it reminds me of what Heather Donahue was saying when she was filming Blair Witch Project. And they said, weren't you ever afraid being out there? And she said, no. You know, you're just making a movie. If anything's coming after you, it's not real.
True.
And I'm like, yeah, I get that, but have you ever been to one of those haunted attractions where the actors are coming at you, and sometimes you can't help but think, like, shit, like Toy Story, like, will it come alive when I'm not really around? You know?
Hold up, you used Toy Story? I'm like, you could have went like the whole thing of like
Listen,
Chucky or
there's a ghost
Indian in the
story
cupboard?
in Toy Story. I'm telling you this right now. Disney's done some fucked up shit. I'm sure there's a what if of Toy Story where they kill Andy and his whole family.
I'm talking about two different Andys having a bad
Yeah.
childhood.
Wasn't there that meme where there's a box of a good guy doll and Woody looks at it and goes, "Oh fuck"?
Yeah. So really, Toy Story is a horror element? Like, thinking about it now, I'm like, yeah, absolutely. Haunted toys?
Hey, we get these what ifs, and somebody had a really good what if story where they said Peter Pan is really the villain and Captain Hook's really the one trying to save the kids.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
And the more I thought about it, I was like, you know what? Yeah. Peter Pan's kind of a fucked up character.
Yeah, you boys will live forever.
Yeah. He'll probably like suck the soul out of you. That was always like the scary stories that creeped me out the most. That there was some like spiritual element that didn't care what age you were. Like, and especially the younger you were, it was, I'll kill you. Like, that was the thing that got me the most with Hocus Pocus. Was at the very beginning, they sucked the soul out of the little girl and it ages her to the point where she basically dies.
Yeah, I think she did die, to be honest.
And then the brother turns into the cat and lives forever until the witches die again. And I remember just thinking, man, that was crazy. Even another crazy story, you'll laugh at this, but Ernest Scared Stupid with the troll and it turns the kids into wooden dolls. Yo, that is frightening as fuck.
Oh, no, it is. Don't get me wrong. I'm honestly like, that's the one movie from my childhood that always stuck with me. Like, Hocus Pocus has always been here. It's never going away. Obviously, we're getting a sequel. But Ernest Scared Stupid, those movies fell off. Except, well, the Ernest movies, I should say, in general. But that movie has stuck with me for the rest of my fucking life, okay? All I can think of is that troll and those fucking kids.
Turn them into wooden dolls?
Yeah.
Oh, shit. And then when you saw those wooden dolls, you're like, oh, fuck.
I'm just saying, though, they should do a sequel with John Cena and Ernest and make it his kid, okay? Another one that just popped in my mind. Did you ever see the movie on Disney called Mr. Boogedy? It's actually on Disney Plus now. They actually did the sequel. It's a people who bought a house that's haunted, and the ghost in it is literally just being a dick. And the ghost is called Mr. Boogedy. It is the cheesiest thing I've ever seen in my life. But I remember as a kid that it was scary as shit. And I'm watching it now, I'm like, oh, dude, this is bad.
Yeah, I know. I hate it when you just look back and go, oh, man, why was I so scared of this? At least, like, if I watch a movie like A Nightmare on Elm Street, I can still look back and go, oh, I can see why I was scared of this as a kid. The other ones, no.
No, man.
But I think it's also because, well, even like in Tim Burton's Sleepy Hollow, like Jackie and I were just watching that recently, and I said, I think what makes the first Nightmare on Elm Street and Tim Burton's Sleepy Hollow great movies are they're ghost stories combined with a true crime and a psychology, like a psychological element which psychology to me is always fun and fascinating. And in Elm Street, it goes from nobody believes you that there's a ghost of a dead guy to Sleepy Hollow where everybody believes there's a ghost of a dead guy, but the investigator doesn't believe it until he witnesses it himself. And then it just changes completely.
Doesn't he get stabbed and that's when he actually believes it? It's been a while since I've watched the movie.
No, it's when he witnesses the magistrate get his head chopped off and the horseman makes an encounter by him but doesn't kill him.
Okay.
Because he found out that like he's spiritually controlled.
That's kind of crazy.
Right?
It's been a while since. I might actually have to go and rewatch it.
There you go. You're welcome.
It's
It's nothing like the book at all, but I mean Sleepy Hollow, The Legend of Sleepy Hollow by Washington Irving is a short story. I mean, if you want something that's just quick and to the point of what the book is, the Disney cartoon pretty much nails it. the Tim Burton Sleepy Hollow movie is more, like I said, ghost story meets true crime. There is a like a tribute to it, if you will, where Ichabod is crossing the bridge in that movie, and the horseman comes and chases him with the jack-o'-lantern, and you even hear the frog going Ichabod, Ichabod, like in the cartoon.
Yeah.
But I'm glad they put that in to just be like, yeah, this is from the book, this is from the cartoon. Here's a little tribute mush for you.
That's actually really cool, though. Like, them actually paying attention to the elements of the ghost story.
And it's nothing uncommon. Like, we see it a lot more nowadays, like, especially in everything. It's almost like a Stan Lee cameo, like how Marvel recognizes the father and puts him in, even though he's passed away. There's usually a picture of him or something somewhere.
Yeah.
You know, I just think stuff like that is so cool. Or how, I know people aren't going to witness it or see that, but there was that Batgirl movie that WB was going to make until they officially canceled it, and they said there was going to be like Michael Keaton Batman tributes, and I think there was going to be a mural of Danny DeVito's Penguin.
Get the fuck out of
So
here.
they were recognizing the history and were keeping it in that realm. I thought that was really cool. Well, Michael Keaton was even supposed to be back as a cameo in that too, but unfortunately it looks like we'll never see that. I would just want to see his cameo at least, if that would be the case.
Give it time. Like,
That's what I'm thinking.
We thought about that with the Snyder Cut. Eventually, they'll be like, well, we have this movie. Got to do something with it.
Yeah. Well, I think because Warner Brothers is going to collect some insurance write-off from it, I think it's going to be a significant amount of time before that would ever happen. Because Snyder Cut was really just, we got to complete it and we don't have the money to complete it.
Okay.
Was the issue. This is actually involving insurance, which could come back and bite the studio in the ass.
I have
Like, just give us the Michael Keaton Batman suit stuff. That's all I ask for.
It's like a 20-minute, like, whatever. Here.
Exactly.
Here's all the stuff that plays into Tim Burton's Batman, and you're fuck off.
Yeah, that's all I want to see. At least the pictures. Give me the pictures and the Michael Keaton stuff. That's all I want. But, boy, yeah. I mean, I can go on and on about scary story stuff and tell you more and more about what I've, like, indulged in, but I think it's about time we start talking about the stories and read off a couple of them.
Sounds like a plan.
Alrighty.
I'll let you go first, since you...
Let me go
that
first?
book means a lot to you, actually.
Yes. So, the book I have here, again, is In a Dark, Dark Room by Alvin Schwartz. Or I should say, In a Dark, Dark Room and Other Scary Stories. Retold by Alvin Schwartz. And he actually took influence from other stories and just basically condensed them down. I won't read everything about how he condensed it down, but it's in the book if you ever want to check it out, or if anybody wants to message me. I'm on Facebook and Instagram, you know, if you want to learn anything more from it. But one story I'm going to tell is a story that's actually... my sister actually told me about this and read it to me when I was younger. And it's always stuck in my head. And the illustrations itself here are pretty wild. They're fun, they're cartoony, yet they're kind of creepy.
That's a creepy, like, doll-looking girl with a doll.
There is a weird element in the art here. And, of course, the story itself makes you feel uneasy. But this story is called The Green Ribbon. Once there was a girl named Jenny. She was like all the other girls, except for one thing. She always wore a green ribbon around her neck. There was a boy named Alfred in her class. Alfred liked Jenny, and Jenny liked Alfred. One day he asked her, "Why do you wear that green ribbon all the time?" "I cannot tell you," said Jenny. But Alfred kept asking, "Why do you wear it?" And Jenny would say, "It is not important." Jenny and Alfred grew up and fell in love. One day they got married. After their wedding, Alfred said, "Now that we are married, you must tell me about the green ribbon." "You still must wait," said Jenny. "I will tell you when the right time comes." Years passed. Alfred and Jenny grew old. One day, Jenny became very sick. The doctor told her she was dying. Jenny called Alfred to her side. "Alfred," she said, "now I can tell you about the green ribbon. Untie it, and you will see why I could not tell you before. Slowly and carefully, Alfred untied the ribbon, and Jenny's head fell off.
Get the fuck out of here. Wow.
Yeah.
I was thinking, like, when you're reading that, I was thinking more or less like how Orphan was.
Uh,
But it wasn't until the end I'm like, oh my god.
What's even better yet is years later, my sister was down in Philadelphia, and she sends me this text, and she goes, "Doesn't this lady look like the girl from the Green Ribbon story?"
Oh, no way.
Straight up, looks right like her.
Yeah. That's kind of crazy.
Right? And that's the story that I've always had like resonate with me, because it was one of the stories that my sister Farrell told me growing up, and I figured that's one I should start with. So yeah.
That's actually pretty cool. The one that I'm gonna read is actually this. It's a collection of book stories. It's in Spooky Campfire Tales. It's retold by S.E. Scholzer, if that's how I say it correctly.
Schlosser?
Yeah. The funny thing with this book is I've had it for years, and every Halloween I pull it out and just read a random story out of it. As like every day, just because I can. But it wasn't until like we started doing this that I actually like was looking for specific ones in it, and I just happened to lose the one I needed. So this one's been told multiple times. We've all heard it as kids, so you know the hook. So, all right. Wow. The reports have been on the radio all day, though Jane hadn't paid much attention to them. Some crazy man has escaped from the state asylum. They were calling him the Hook Man because he lost his right arm and had it replaced with a hook. He was a serial killer, and everyone in the region was warned to keep watch and report anything suspicious. But this didn't interest Jane in the slightest. What did madmen have to do with her? She had more pressing matters on her mind, like what she should wear on her date with Matt. After several hours of hemming and hawing, Jane chose a smashing off-the-shoulder affair in the very slightest style, latest style, and spent an hour curling her long, dark hair. Finally, she was ready to go. And just in time, too, she heard Matt's car pull up outside and went to meet him on the porch. "Don't stay out past curfew," her father warned lazily from his place in the porch swing. "Of course not," Matt said. He was always the perfect gentleman in front of her father. The radio turned up and sang along to their favorite CD as they cruised up the mountain to the local drive-in theater. The place was a madhouse. They laughed and they ate popcorn and traded jokes with several other couples who had parked in the same vicinity. This was a wonderful evening. When the movie was through, Matt eyeballed Jane and slyly suggested they drive to the nearby overlook to take in the view. Jane grinned back at him, happy to do a little necking with her favorite fellow. The blue outfit was definitely a hit. Jane made a mental note to buy a few more off-the-shoulder dresses as she cuddled close to her boyfriend in the darkened car. They tuned into a local radio station and spent some time necking to the sound of romantic music in the background. Then the announcer came on and repeated the warning Jane had heard this afternoon. An insane killer with a hook in place of his right hand was loose in the area. She stiffened in Matt's arms, vividly conscious of their remote location on top of a hill. Suddenly, the dark, moonless night didn't seem so romantic to her at all. The overlook was secluded and off the beaten track after all. A perfect spot for a deranged madman to lurk, Jane thought, pushing her amorous boyfriend away. "I don't like the sound of that announcement," Jane said nervously. "Maybe we should just get out of here. That hook man sounds dangerous." "Oh, baby, come on. It's nothing," Matt said, trying to get another kiss. She pushed him away again. "No, really. We're all alone up here. I'm scared," she said. "I'll protect you," Matt says confidently, taking her back into his arms. But Jane was no longer in the mood for romance. She was scared and made no bones about it. Sorry. The couple argued for a moment more, but then the car shook a bit as if something or someone had pressed against it. Jane gave a shriek. "Get us out of here now!" "Jeez," Matt said in disgust. "Just like a girl." Our sour expression on his face he turned the key and went roaring out of the lover's lane and with the screeching of tires. They drove home in stony silence, Matt occasionally muttering to himself about crazy notion of girls, Jay ignoring him, just happy that they had gotten away from that secluded spot. When they pulled into her driveway, Matt refused to help her get out of the car. A small courtesy he usually paid her. Typical male, she fumed, and he was being so unreasonable. He opened the door diligently, wow, and stepped into her driveway with her chin up, her lips set. Whirling around, she slammed the door hard as she could, and then she screamed. Matt leapt out of the car, his ire forgot in concern, and raced around the engine to her side of the car, catching Jane in his arms. She cried, "What is it? What's wrong?" And then he saw it, a bloody hook hanging from the handle of the passenger side door, wrenched from the arm of the raving lunatic who had been stalking them on top of the hill.
Oh!
So, like I said, I've heard that one a lot before, and as soon as I read it, actually I read it this morning, and I'm like, holy shit, that's the perfect one for today. Because we've heard that told so many times through every urban legend, this and that. I was like, it was just kind of cool finding it in that book. So I was like, it's kind of like a nostalgia thing that the fact that it was that story.
It's so funny when you go back and you realize, oh wow, so this is where that story comes from. It's like how I said that a lot of these stories in A Dark, Dark Room were influenced by something that Alvin Schwartz said that he took from a bunch of other different little things. Like here it says the green ribbon is based on a European folk motif in which a red thread is worn around a person's neck. The thread marks the place where the head was cut off, then reattached.
Oh, shit.
And that's how he got influence for that story. And just short story put together.
That's pretty cool. Do you have another one you read?
I mean, I can if you want.
Yeah, go for it. We got time for at least two more.
Some of these are comical, but... yeah.
I mean, was it the terror and comedy is probably the best part about it.
I mean, there's this one that's actually called In a Dark, Dark Room, but I think it's really almost more like a poem, and then at the very end you just find out there's a ghost in the trunk. And that's and this is the picture of the ghost. You gotta look at it.
That is a crazy looking ghost, I'm not gonna lie.
That shit scared me as a kid. That's the one thing from the book that really got me.
Dude, I believe it. Just looking at how going, oh fuck.
Yeah, ah! It's like a transgender witch with a unibrow, cross eyes,
I think when I first saw it, I thought it was a troll. Now seeing that it was actually a ghost.
Yeah, it's like, what in the hell? Oh, here we go. This one's actually, ugh. This one's actually a little tough. The night it rained. It was late at night. I was driving past the cemetery when I saw a boy standing in the rain. "Do you want to ride home?" I asked. "Yes, please," he said. "I live on Front Street next to the school." I handed him my old sweater. "It is cold tonight," I said, "and you are wet. You had better put this on." After that, we did not talk. When we stopped at his house, I said, "Keep the sweater. I will get it tomorrow. What is your name?" "Jim," he said. "Thanks for the ride." I stopped for the sweater the next day. A woman came to the door. "Is Jim at home?" I asked. "I have come to pick up my sweater." She looked at me in a strange way. "It must have been another boy," she said. "Jim is our son, but he has been dead for almost a year. He is buried in the cemetery." I told her how sorry I was, and I left. I did not know what to think. The next morning, I went to the cemetery. I wanted to see Jim's grave. Lying across the grave was my sweater.
Oh, wow. That's kind of crazy.
And that was based on variants of widespread folk tale, The Ghostly Hitchhiker. Even I was like, whoa, that's probably, that and The Green Ribbon are probably the darkest and deepest telling tales in the book.
Okay.
Other ones have like a bit of comedy to them, which make it fun. It is that fun balance in there. Like
It's kind of nice though, like mixture of both.
mm-hmm. And then there's this one here called The Ghost of John, and all it is have you seen the ghost of John? Long white bones and the flesh all gone. Oh, wouldn't it be chilly with no skin on? And it's just a skeleton outside.
Dude, that sounds like shit talking. It's funny right there.
And it's like,
Bitch ass skeleton.
And here it just says the Ghost of John was collected by the compiler in 1979 from Lynette M. Lee, age 8, Stockton, California.
That's pretty cool though.
Yeah. Like you said, shit talking at its finest.
Bitch ass skeleton doesn't have any skin. Fuck you.
And it's there shivering. Like I can just hear it because it's just all like bones and teeth.
Like oh my gosh. So my second story is actually from Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark. I actually got a collection of all 3 books together. It's called 3 books that chill you to the bones. Obviously by Alvin Schwartz. And this one actually comes from, I believe it's the 3rd book. Look real quick. Oh no, the 2nd book. It's called The Church. I was gonna do like the bloody toe, but I'm like, I already talked about it, so I just chose a random story out of it with a.
Doesn't mean you can't.
I know, but I'm a. There's a pharaoh. A pharaoh.
Oh, we're in Egypt. Walk like an Egyptian.
That's bad.
With a
dude.
bloody toe. Guess it makes dancing hard.
Oh.
But
Dude, that's cheesy. Like I'm no dad here. You're doing the dad jokes.
I'm the king of dad jokes.
I know.
Hey, have you heard about the glass coffin?
No.
It remains to be seen.
Get out of here. Next, you're gonna tell me to work in a mirror factory.
Oh
my gosh. All right. There was a fellow named Larry Berger who wasn't afraid of anybody alive, but anybody who was dead scared the wits out of him. One night, Larry was out driving in the country in his old Jeep when he got caught in a bad thunderstorm. The rain was coming down in sheets. Since his Jeep didn't have a top on it, Larry started to look for a place to take shelter. But at the first place he came, he didn't even slow down. It was an old deserted cabin, probably as dry as a bone inside, but Larry knew for a fact that it was haunted. He wasn't going to stay there. A few miles further, he came to an old abandoned church standing alone in a field. It had been used in years. All the window glass was gone, but it still had sections of the roof intact. So Larry parked his Jeep and ran inside. It was dark as could be in there. Larry groped around until he found a pew and sat down. It was nice and dry, just as he had thought it would be. He stretched out his legs and made himself comfortable. Suddenly, there was a big flash of lightning, and Larry saw that he wasn't the only one in the church. There were people sitting along every pew. They had all had their heads bowed as if they were praying, and they all were dressed in white. These must be ghosts sitting in their shrouds, Larry thought. They must have come in from the graveyard to keep dry. Larry jumped up and ran down the aisle as fast as he could. Ran right into one of the ghosts, and the ghost went, bah! That's a good one.
Nice.
Actually, I'll do another one. Oops, as I lose the book. It's called A Weird Blue Light. Yeah. One night in October 1864, a Confederate blockade runner slipped by some Union gunships at the entrance of Galveston Bay in Texas. It made it safely to port its cargo of food and other necessities. Lewis Billings, the master of the small vessel, was getting ready to weigh anchor when he was startled by a shriek from one of the crew. A strange old-fashioned schooner with a big black flag was rushing down at us, Billings said later. She was afire with a sort of weird blue light that lighted up every nook and cranny of her. The crew was pulling at ropes and doing other work. They had paid us no attention. They didn't even glance our way. They all had ghastly bleeding wounds, but their faces and eyes were those of dead men. The man who had shrieked had fallen to his knees, his teeth chattering as he gasped out a prayer. Overcoming my own terror, that was chilling the very marrow of my bones. I rushed forward, shouting to the others as I ran. Suddenly, the schooner vanished before my eyes. Some say it was a ghost of Jean Lafitte's pirate ship Pride that sank off Galveston Island in 1821 or 1822. She was seen again in 1892 in the same waters with the same crew.
Ah.
So kind of like when I saw that one, kind of reminded me of The Fog a little bit, like with the really dark ship, dead pirates, obviously. But it's like that was the other reason I chose that one because like it had a like more of a feel of horror to it, even though like no one's gonna believe you.
Yeah. And like you said, that there is some like slight comedy to it with it. Kind of reminds me of how like they said that there was actually slight comedy in Texas Chainsaw Massacre, and on the surface you don't see it, and then later on you're like, oh yeah, now I do kind of see it. There is like a weird balance of humor and horror. Well, look at Scooby-Doo.
Oh, absolutely.
You know, and I mean Rocky Horror is even kind of like that in a way. I mean, it's definitely not a horror film, but it's all satire. I mean, it was basically like a comedy it was like Scary Movie in a way, really, before Scary Movie, just as a musical that was just so over the top. And like
Yeah,
you don't know what to think about it exactly, but you just go, it's a movie, it's fun, I love it, and the music's great.
Absolutely.
But all the like Rocky looks like the Mummy, and then he's created as like a Frankenstein's monster, and then there's aliens and shit involved. So it's like the haunted castles and stuff. So it's like everything's there, but it's funny.
Absolutely. And sometimes you just need that element of comedy to make the terror more terrifying.
Look at speaking of scary stories, we can save it for another time. Like two of my favorite scary stories to tell in the dark. One is The White Wolf. I don't know if you read that one or remember it.
No, I don't.
That's a good one. And the other one that's like terrifying but yet comedy gold at the end is The Viper.
Oh yeah, I just looked at the picture of that one. That's awesome.
I mean, you're like terrified throughout that whole story, and then the very end is just the punchline, and you're like, oh my god, this is great. Like,
but it's so cheesy.
It is so cheesy, but it's like, okay, you got me.
Exactly.
Well, I don't want to drag this episode on too much because I feel like we've said enough. Do you have anything else to add?
No, actually, like we've touched a lot of different things on this, and like we definitely know that we love ghost stories.
Oh my god, I feel like it's a lost medium in a way.
I just thought of this, like, so I remember, was it probably, let's say like 8 years ago? I came over at the time. I was obsessed with American Werewolf in London because I was laughing about how big the werewolf was. We were at your aunt's house and we were sitting around the campfire then and talking, like telling ghost stories. I was like, this would have been the perfect element to definitely do that.
Absolutely. Yo, at her horse farm?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, we should go and just say like, yo, can we just do it? I'm sure she would.
I should probably join in, to be honest.
Yo, bring your projector and we'll even play a movie outside.
I don't
put
have
it on
that
the
anymore. I got rid of it.
Damn it.
It'll be hard to get a new one.
Yeah, when you're telling ghost stories, who cares?
Just gonna run around in a sheet.
That's right. There you go. Oh, we got the horses. Headless Horseman. Carve a pumpkin, too. So with that being said, we're going to wrap up our episode of Scary Stories to Tell by the Campfire. This was a fun episode. I really enjoyed talking about this. It actually was nice reminiscing about ghost stories and reminding me about going to the elementary school library and like all the fun little campfire adventures I did have, and us going to camp, and
oh, absolutely,
when we were telling ghost stories like in that cabin by campfires, and all the Halloween decor and the leaves were on the ground that were dead from fall and stuff, and that was so much fun.
Yeah,
I love all those hay rides and wooded areas in the fall, and like, hey, that's what makes Pennsylvania like such a Halloween town and stuff.
Halloween town?
Halloween area, whatever. Like, depending on where you go. Not all of Pennsylvania is like that. I mean,
some parts are just scary, but
yeah, Philly. So with that being said, we shall sign off. This is Colin Peters.
And Jeff Manfred.
Thank you all once again for listening. Stay safe. Stay crazy.
And happy Halloween.
Please, somebody help me.
Oh, yeah.